July 14th, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. The hedgerows are still smoking. Private First Class Daniel Mercer, 2nd Armored Division, wipes grease from his hands and leans back against the hull of an M4 Sherman, whose engine deck is still warm. The tank threw a track less than an hour ago, not from enemy fire, but from the grinding churn of Norman mud and rubble. The crew waits calmly. No one looks panicked. No one shouts. A replacement track pin lies on a folded canvas beside Mercer. He didn't have to measure it. Didn't have to check a serial number. He just reached into a crate and pulled one out. Across the field, under armed guard, 3 German prisoners watch in silence. One of them, Gefreiter Karl Weiss, former mechanic with a Panzer regiment, cannot look away. The Americans are laughing, not because the tank broke down. Weiss understands breakdowns. Machines fail. That is war. What he does not understand is how casually these men treat it, how confident they seem that the problem will be solved. Weiss whispers something in German. The other prisoner shakes his head, slowly. That track would fit any Sherman, Weiss says, almost to himself. An hour earlier, Weiss had surrendered near a wrecked Panzer IV, whose final drive had failed during a retreat. The tank wasn't destroyed. It wasn't hit. It simply stopped. The part that failed was minor, replaceable. In theory. In practice, it might as well have been destroyed. The spare on the support truck didn't fit this variant. The battalion had at least 3 slightly different versions of the same transmission. Different suppliers. Different tolerances. Different bolt patterns. Under fire, there was no time to improvise. The crew abandoned the tank and ran. Now Weiss watches American soldiers replace parts as if they were changing a tire on a civilian truck, and it unsettles him deeply. Sergeant Tom O'Leary, the Sherman's tank commander, notices the prisoners staring. They look like they've seen a ghost, he mutters. Mercer shrugs. Probably think we're crazy trusting this thing. O'Leary taps the armor plate affectionately. This thing works because it's supposed to. The words sound simple, almost naive. They are not. Weiss had spent 2 years repairing German armored vehicles on the Eastern Front and in France. He knew the reputation of American tanks. Thin armor, gasoline engines, easy to burn. But watching them here, in Normandy, he realizes something more important. They are predictable. Every bolt seems to belong. Every fitting matches expectation. The tools fit the nuts. The manuals match the machine. The crates are labeled clearly, in plain language. There is no guessing. In the German army, Weiss had carried notebooks filled with handwritten corrections, field modifications, workarounds, notes like, fits only on OSF G, not F, or requires adapter, unavailable. German engineering was brilliant. But it was fragmented. The Americans lift the track back into place. Mercer drives the pin home with a hammer. The engine starts on the first try. The tank moves. Just like that. One of the German prisoners lets out a short, humorless laugh. In our army, he says in broken English, we repair only when lucky. Weiss nods. In yours, he adds, you repair because you expect to. Later that afternoon, the prisoners are marched past an American motor pool. Rows of trucks stretch down a dirt road. GMC, CCKDs, Dodges, Jeeps. Hoods open. Mechanics working in rhythm. Crates sit stacked nearby. Tires, engines, carburetors, axles, all interchangeable. Weiss stops walking. A guard barks at him to keep moving, but Weiss stares anyway. In his unit, one broken truck could immobilize an entire column while officers argued about which part might fit. Here, vehicles seem designed with the assumption that they will break, and that someone will fix them quickly. That assumption changes everything. That night, inside a temporary POW enclosure, Weiss talks quietly with other captured soldiers. One had served with an infantry division outside Caen. Another had been a driver in Italy. They all say the same thing. American equipment breaks. But it breaks in ways that can be solved. German equipment often doesn't. Too many versions, one man says. Too clever, says another. No parts, adds a third. Weiss lies back, staring at the canvas ceiling, listening to distant engines rumbling through the night. For the first time in the war, he begins to understand something that has nothing to do with tactics, courage, or ideology. The Americans trust their equipment because it has earned that trust. The Germans hope their equipment will hold, because they know what happens if it doesn't. Somewhere nearby, another Sherman breaks down. And somewhere else, another German vehicle is abandoned intact, left behind, because the right part does not exist within reach. The war grinds forward, not just on firepower, but on assumptions about whether a machine will work tomorrow and whether fixing it is even possible under fire. Carl Weiss closes his eyes. He does not yet know the full scale of what he is seeing, but the first crack has formed. And it is not in steel. It is in belief. July 16th, 1944. American rear area, Normandy. The rain starts before dawn. Carl Weiss wakes to the sound of engines, dozens of them, turning over in near unison. He sits up inside the POW enclosure and listens, frowning. No shouting, no frantic revving, just a steady rhythm, as if the vehicles themselves expect to move. Outside the wire, an American maintenance column is already at work. Weiss is assigned to a work detail later that morning. Under guard, he and several other prisoners are marched past a field depot carved out of an orchard. Tarps are stretched between trees. Wooden pallets sit in neat rows. Everything smells of oil, wet earth, and fresh coffee. What stops Weiss in his tracks is not the number of vehicles. It is the order. An M10 tank destroyer sits beside a disabled M4 Sherman. Nearby, a GMC truck waits with its hood open. Mechanics move between them carrying identical tool rolls. One soldier removes a damaged component from the Sherman's suspension and walks it over to a crate. He doesn't ask a question. He doesn't consult a chart. He simply selects a replacement, and it fits. Weiss feels a tightening in his chest. Back in his Panzer regiment, a repair like this would have required checking the chassis number, the production batch, the manufacturer. Even then, the part might fit, or it might not. If it didn't, the tank would sit immobilized until the correct variant could be found, often days later, sometimes never. Here the Americans behave as if failure is expected, and already accounted for. A guard notices Weiss staring. "You work on tanks?" the guard asks. "Yes," Weiss replies carefully. The guard gestures toward the Sherman. "Same as the last one?" Weiss hesitates. "Similar," he says, "but not same." The guard chuckles. That's the difference. Later that afternoon, Weiss is allowed, under supervision, to assist with minor tasks. He hands tools to an American mechanic named Corporal Eddie Ramirez, a man with grease-stained hands and an easy grin. Ramirez works quickly, confidently. When something doesn't fit, he doesn't curse the machine. He reaches for another part. "Designers figured we'd break this stuff," Ramirez says casually, "so they made it easy to unbreak." Weiss does not answer, because the thought unsettles him. In Germany, machines were designed to be perfect. Precision tolerances, optimized performance, minimal redundancy. But perfection leaves no margin. That evening, Weiss speaks with another prisoner, Unteroffizier Franz Keller, formerly a supply NCO. Keller laughs bitterly when Weiss describes what he has seen. "We had 6 different types of half-track in my unit," Keller says. 6. Same job. Different parts." He shakes his head. "By 1944, we were stealing parts from wrecks just to keep one running." They sit in silence for a moment. Then Keller adds quietly, "The Americans plan for failure. We planned for excellence." The implication hangs between them. Only one of those philosophies survives contact with war. As days pass, Weiss notices something else. American soldiers trust their equipment without ceremony. They don't pray over engines. They don't argue with manuals. They assume that if something breaks, it will be replaced, and quickly. That trust changes behavior. Convoys move faster. Units take risks, knowing breakdowns won't strand them. Tank commanders push machines hard because they know repairs are not a death sentence. German units, by contrast, had learned to be cautious, not just of the enemy, but of their own machinery. One failure could mean capture, or worse. On July 18th, Weiss witnesses a column of American tanks roll past a crossroads still marked by burned-out German vehicles. The abandoned hulks are intact, engines present, armor unpenetrated, mechanical casualties, each one a silent admission. Weiss realizes something then that no intelligence report had ever captured. The Americans are not winning because their machines never fail. They are winning because failure does not stop them. That night, Weiss writes in his head the explanation he will one day give, if anyone ever asks. It is not that American soldiers are braver. It is not that their weapons are always better. It is that their system assumes chaos and thrives in it. Standard parts, shared tools, universal fittings. A war fought with the expectation that something will go wrong, and the certainty that it can be fixed. Outside, trucks roll past through the darkness, headlights hooded. Engines steady. Weiss listens until sleep finally comes, and with it, the growing understanding that the war was decided long before this field in Normandy, in factories, warehouses, and decisions about whether one bolt should fit everywhere or only in one perfect place. July 25th, 1944, west of St. Lo, Operation Cobra. The earth shakes like a living thing. Karl Weiss feels the concussion before he hears it. A deep, rolling pressure that rattles teeth and turns the air thick. American bombers have been overhead since dawn. Now the ground war is moving again. To from the edge of a sunken lane, Weiss watches an American armored column surge forward behind the bombardment. Shermans, half-tracks, self-propelled guns, all moving fast, kicking up dust and smoke as if speed itself were a weapon. Then one of them stops. A Sherman lurches, smoke puffing from its engine compartment. The driver kills the engine instantly. The tank rolls to a halt, angled awkwardly at the side of the road. Weiss's instincts scream the same conclusion they always have. That tank is finished. In the German army, a breakdown this close to the front would mean abandonment within minutes. Recovery vehicles are scarce. Towing under fire is suicide. The crew would destroy what they could and retreat on foot. But the American crew does not bail out. They stay inside. Moments later, a half-track recovery vehicle pulls in behind them. Another Sherman covers the road ahead, turret scanning. Infantry fan out, rifles up. The tank commander jumps down, already shouting instructions. "No panic," he says. "Same issue as yesterday." Same issue. Weiss feels a strange tightening in his throat. The repair begins under artillery fire. Not hurried, not desperate. Practiced. The engine deck comes open. Tools appear. A damaged component is lifted free. Weiss recognizes it immediately. A part he has replaced dozens of times on German vehicles, each slightly different, each demanding careful fitting. The American mechanic reaches into a crate, pulls one out, bolts it in place. It fits. Shells land in the distance. Dirt rains down. No one flinches. Weiss watches the entire process, counting the minutes in his head. 12 minutes. The engine turns over. The tank rejoins the column, and the war continues moving forward, as if nothing happened. Weiss sinks down against the bank of the lane, stunned. In his Panzer regiment, repairs under fire were a gamble, sometimes successful, often fatal. The uncertainty alone slowed everything. Officers hesitated to push vehicles hard because a breakdown meant losing the machine forever. Here, breakdown is treated as a delay. A short one. Later that day, Weiss sees something even more unsettling. A damaged German Panther sits abandoned near a crossroads, its crew long gone. The damage is minor, a broken final drive, a known weakness. Weiss knows exactly what part would fix it. But the part does not exist here. It never will. Nearby, American engineers study the Panther with interest, not urgency. "It's a good tank," one of them says. "Too bad you can't keep it running." Weiss almost laughs. That evening, the POW detail is halted near an American supply dump. Trucks roll in continuously. Parts flow outward like blood from a beating heart. Engines, transmissions, tracks, suspension arms, radios. Everything labeled, everything standardized. Weiss realizes the Americans are not improvising logistics. They are executing a plan built years before the war began. He remembers the German factories he once visited. Each manufacturer proud of its own refinements, each variation justified, each improvement marginally better, and catastrophically incompatible. No one had asked the most important question: what happens when this breaks under fire? As darkness falls, Weiss speaks quietly with Keller again. "In our army," Weiss says, "the machine decides what the unit can do." Keller nods. And here, the unit decides what the machine must endure. They sit listening to the distant rumble of engines, the sound uninterrupted, relentless. For the first time, Weiss understands why American soldiers trust their equipment, not because it is flawless, but because it is replaceable. And in war, replaceable means survivable. Somewhere ahead, another tank breaks down, and somewhere behind it, another crate is already waiting. The Americans advance not on perfect machines, but on the certainty that no single failure can stop them. Weiss closes his eyes. The realization is complete now. Germany did not lose because it lacked genius. It lost because genius refused to bend. August 10th, 1944, somewhere near Avranches, France. Karl Weiss stands beside the road as another American column rolls past him, dust hanging in the air like fog. The breakout from Normandy is no longer a battle. It is a flood. Vehicles move day and night, tanks, trucks, artillery, fuelers, ambulances. Everything flows west and south with an inevitability that feels mechanical. Weiss watches an American M4 Sherman grind over a broken culvert, its suspension protesting loudly. The driver doesn't slow. In the German army, that sound would have been a warning. Here, it is background noise. Weiss has now been a prisoner for nearly a month. He has watched American units advance faster than German orders can keep up. He has seen intact German vehicles abandoned because a single component failed, and he has seen American vehicles abused mercilessly, driven hard, overloaded, pushed through terrain that would have terrified German commanders. The difference, he realizes, is not arrogance. It is confidence. One afternoon, Weiss is assigned to a road-clearing detail. As they work, an American GMC CCBQ truck pulls off the road, steam hissing from its radiator. The driver swears softly, climbs down, and waves over a mechanic. No guards panic, no officer shouts. The hood comes up. The mechanic looks once, nods, and calls for a replacement. A second truck arrives within minutes. The radiator is swapped. The damaged one is tossed onto the back of a recovery vehicle like scrap. The truck is back on the road in under 15 minutes. Weiss feels something close to disbelief. "In our army," he says quietly to the guard beside him, "this truck would be lost." The guard shrugs. "Not if you've got another one." Weiss understands the meaning immediately. Germany built machines to last. America built systems to continue. That night, Weiss sits with Keller and several other prisoners as they listen to the rumble of traffic on a nearby highway, what the Americans now call the Red Ball Express. The sound never stops. One of the prisoners, a former Luftwaffe ground crewman, shakes his head slowly. "They don't care if a truck dies," he says. "They care if the road goes quiet." No one argues. Weeks later, Weiss is transported farther west, passing through towns already filling with American depots. He sees warehouses overflowing with identical crates, engines wrapped in waxed paper, axles stacked like firewood, radios sealed and labeled, each item anonymous, each item interchangeable. It dawns on him that German intelligence had been looking in the wrong places all along. They counted tanks, they counted planes, they counted guns. They never counted confidence. After the war, Weiss will speak to American interrogators. They will ask about tactics, morale, leadership. He will answer politely. But what he wants to tell them is something else, that the moment he knew the war was lost had nothing to do with bombing or firepower. It was the moment he saw a tank repaired under fire without hesitation. Years later, in a rebuilt Germany, Weiss will work as a civilian mechanic. One day, an American vehicle, surplus, battered, unmistakably utilitarian, will be brought into his shop. He will smile despite himself. The bolts will fit. The parts will match. The machine will forgive mistakes, and Weiss will remember Normandy. Because what stunned the German prisoners was not that American equipment worked. It was that American soldiers expected it to work and had built an entire war around that expectation. Standardized parts, unified designs, logistics that assumed failure and erased it before it mattered. German equipment had demanded perfection. American equipment assumed reality. The prisoners learned it too late. Under fire, the Americans trusted their machines because they trusted the system behind them. The Germans trusted brilliance and paid for its fragility. The war, in the end, was not decided by who had the better weapon. It was decided by who could keep moving when weapons failed. Karl Weiss watches another convoy disappear down the road. Engines steady, parts replaceable, confidence unbroken. He knows now why the Americans did not fear breakdowns. They had already solved them.